So now that we have the chat room's view up and visible, the next functionality that we are going to create is the most important functionality of the app, and that is the actual chat functionality. So what we want to be able to do is to be able to type in a message here, and the moment we press enter, this message feed should update not only for the active user but for all users connected to this chat room. And the way we will do that is that we are going to listen to the key up event on this input field, and whenever the enter key is intercepted, we want to create a new event and broadcast this message over the socket. And at the same time, we want to locally update the message feed for the active user. So let's create this functionality. So back in the room.html, we will use the jQuery notation to listen for the key up event on an input field where we have the class name of new message. So we're listening for a key up on this input field, and specifically let's also pass in the event object, and what we want to do is to listen to a key code of 13, and 13 specifically represents the enter key pressed. Okay, so whenever the event listener here detects a key with the code of 13, which is the enter key, that is when it will actually create an event and broadcast this message to the Node app. The second condition should be that the input field should not be empty. Now once these conditions are satisfied, we will use the messages object which we have been using earlier, and we will emit a new event by the name of new message, and this new message will carry with it an object. And what we want to carry in this object is first the room number, which you can get from the variable called room num. So in the beginning of this script, we had created a variable called room num, and we had set it to room underscore number. This obviously being received from the Node app via the Hogan template engine. So we will just use this variable. We also want the user name to be carried in the message. We also want the user pick to be included in the message, and finally the message itself. Alright, so this will be the packet which will be broadcast over the socket.io connection. At the same time, we also want to update our own message feed. So the user who's typing, the active user, his own message feed should also get updated. Instead of sending the message to the server and getting it back once again, what we will do is we will create a local function which will insert this message into the local message feed directly. So I'm going to create a new function here, and that function will be called update message feed, and later on we will use this same function for updating the message feed with messages from other users. This function should accept two arguments, the pick and the message, because if you look at the UI that we have a user pick over here, and we have the actual message being displayed over here. What exactly do we have to render? Now I have a template which you can see here, and we're going to just copy this template and we'll turn it into a string. So we'll turn it into a string where we can embed data. So the way I like to do this is we'll create a variable called str, and we'll turn each and every line, we'll keep appending each and every line rather, like so. This way it's a little more readable. Now I'm going to insert the user pick here, because the user pick would be the direct URL of the user's profile pic. So we want to just take that data and we want to directly insert it over here, and then we'll get rid of the name over here. On the next line, we will append the actual message. Finally, we will just finish this li element. And now what we have to do is we have to insert it into the DOM. So instead of appending it to the UL, remember that on the page, the message feed is actually an unordered list. So instead of just simply appending each and every one of these LIs, what we're going to do is we're going to prepend. So once the template is created, what we'll do is we will take this template and we will prepend to the messages class or this particular object, and the messages object is in fact the unordered list. So once these templates are created, this line will prepend each message to the unordered list. So once this function is done, what we'll do is we will go back into the key up event listener, and once I have done emitting the message, what I would want to do is to run this function and simply provide it with the user pick and the message. So the message would be like so. And once this is done, then we want to simply empty out the input field as well. Right, so at this point in time, if I were to go here and refresh, if I type in a message, so hi there, and if I press enter, you can see that the message is indeed being inserted into the unordered list. So you can see that the most recent message comes on top since we're using the prepend to. Now, while this is okay, what is not happening at this stage is that the message that we are emitting from the client side page from this view is not being received back in the socket.js. So let's create that functionality. So let's go back into the socket.js, and in the socket.js, we will listen for the new message event, and this will have the data along. This new message event is what we are emitting from the room.html whenever the user presses enter in the input field, and this carries with it the number of the room, the unique number of every chat room. It carries with it the username, the user pick, and the actual message with which the user has typed. So once we receive this back in the socket.js, we will broadcast this to all other users except the active socket. So I, as the active user, do not require this message back in my message feed. Hence, socket.io will broadcast it to all users except the active socket. So the way we will do that is we'll say socket.broadcast.to, and we want to broadcast this to data.room number. So we had initially created rooms by using the socket.join, and these segregated partition rooms can have private conversations. So when I do a socket.broadcast to and I provide with the room number, since the room numbers were initially used to create the rooms, these messages will only be received by other chat users connected to this particular chat room and not by everyone else. Then we'll say dot emit, and you want to emit an event called message feed, and we want to carry with it the data. So the data contains the message, the data contains the user pic, the data contains the username. So we just want to broadcast this to all users connected to the chat room except the active user, that is the user who has typed the message and created the new message event in the first place. Back in the room.html, we have to listen for the message feed event as well. So whenever a message feed event is received, I want to insert that message into my message feed. So the way we will do that is we will listen for the message feed event, and whenever this event is received, we will get the messages out. So messages would be by doing a json.parse and getting the data, and we'll simply run the update message feed and provide this with the user pic, which is in the messages variable, and the message. Right, so let's restart the app. And I'm going to refresh. Consequently, I'll be logged out. Let's log back in. Let's go into the chat room. And if I type the message comes over here. So let's also connect another user to the chat room, and let's see if the messages get across to other users as well. All right, so in this setup, I'm already logged into the chat room over here. And on this side, we are going to attempt to log in another user to the same chat room, and we can see if the chat is actually happening or not. So for the other user, if you click on login with Facebook, you might get this error. So it says app not set up. The developers of this app have not set up this app properly for Facebook login. So what this means is, and what you actually need to do is that you need to go to developer.facebook.com. You need to go into the app that you created earlier, go into the status and review section, and we have this option which says, do you want to make this app and all its live features available to the general public? You need to set this to yes. It's going to ask you to confirm this option. Click on confirm and try logging in the other user now. So let's go back to localhost 3000, and once I click on login with Facebook, I'm already logged into Facebook for the other account, and you can see that the user is able to log in. Click on the Node.js. That's the chat room I'm in on this side. And now if I type in a message, you can see that the message does indeed appear in the message feed of the other user. If the other user types in something, then I can see that message in my message feed. So you can see that the chat functionality is now indeed working. Now let's just do one final thing to make the prepend to a little more interesting. So I'll go back to the room.html, and I'm going to make a tiny change to the line which prepends the message to the message feed. So we will add a hide followed by the prepend to, and then once this is done, we will finish this line with a slide down and provide with the 100 millisecond animation. So what this line will do is it will animate each and every message as it enters the message feed. So once I've made this change, let's just go back and we will simply refresh on both the sides. Let's also get rid of our static message which we have in the room.html. So let's just select this entire thing and I'll simply comment this out. Refresh once again so that the message feed is now empty, and watch what happens. So if I type in, you'll see that it animates in. Okay, so this makes the entire experience a little more interesting.